Already, it looks like we're ready to. Welcome to this special meeting of the Conejo Open Space Conservation Agency. I'll call this meeting to order, and please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Bill De La Pena, absent. Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Nichols,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones, absent. Chair Skay.
Here. Thank you very much. Under public comments, this is a special meeting. Only items listed on the agenda may be addressed pursuant to the Brown Act special meetings provision. Our first item is to authorize an appropriation from the Wildfire Recovery Fund, approve a contract with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council to support community fire safe programs, and to authorize the use of a single source acquisition for contract services. And I will note we have two individuals here. Elaine Himmelfarb, would you like to come up and make any remarks? You don't have to, but
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Elaine Himmelfarb. I'm the Executive Director of the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. And I came to the Fire Safe Council about 2.5, 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago, because I lost my home and my mother of 94 years old lost her home in the Woolsey fire. So a lot of skills I had working in public health, I used as the Executive Director of the Fire Safe Council. We are here today, my colleague Andy Ortega, a board member, and also he's the retired assistant fire chief for Ventura County Fire Department. We're here to talk with you about working together to grow wildfire resilience in with Costco, in our partnership with Costco. It's an area that I feel we can make an impact. We've proposed some really innovative, exciting work that we can accomplish together to build wildfire resilience. So I don't know how much detail to go into our proposal to you. I'll be glad to go into it more. But it's really exciting. It's an exciting partnership. We really want to grow resilience here. There's not enough work being done, I think, in terms of home hardening, assessments, retrofits, education, outreach, chipper events, all those kind of things, all those things in the toolbox to keep our neighborhoods safe is what this partnership is about.
very good. Thank you so much, Elaine.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Ortega, did you also wish to address the board?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us come and share. My name is Andy Ortega, and addressing the chair and the directors, and thank you, Brian, for inviting us. As Elaine said, my background was 37 years in the fire service, and then I retired, and 8 months later, I lost my house in the Thomas fire. And so I can say I can feel it from both sides, you know, the suppression side and also the side of being a victim. And so why I am a board member with the Fire Safe Council is it's really dear to my heart to make a difference. And so I think we have an opportunity in front of us right now, even with this, and you know, you think of it as a small way, but it's a step. It's a step to make a difference, to really say that we can start to really affect, she called it wildfire resistance, but I think life safety and protection of property and our open spaces, and thinking through, you know, a wider picture of how to do that. And so what we're presenting to you is an opportunity not only to collaborate, but also to start making a difference, not just in this county, but other people to look at us as a resource and look at us as they're showing a way on how we can make a difference in life safety, structure safety, community safety. And, you know, if we were to look at just something as simple as fire history, right? And we were to take it back 20 years or 30 years ago or 40 years when I started or 60 years when my father started, we had seasons that were like, this was this and this was that. And, I know what it's like to have such a drastic change in my thinking from a suppression standpoint. And so it must be really daunting for you guys to have a change in your thinking for the future, because we can go back and do retrospection and say, well, all the data says this, but really what is needed is people that can project out and say, this is what will be. When we have 120 million dead trees in the southern Sierras right now, there is forest that we'll never see again in our lifetime. The landscape in the Western Hemisphere is changing. And, people call it global warming or this or that. And I don't know what it is, but I'll tell you what, something's changing. And I've seen it in my career. And why I'm here is because I'm a firm believer that while what's in front of us is really daunting, that we can make a difference with humans. And, I think about the 850,000 people in the county of Ventura. And I think about all the homes in Ventura. And I think about 58 states or counties in the state of California. And what if we were the ones to start leading those 58 counties? What if we were the ones that just started to make a difference with cooperation, collaboration, and starting to say, you know what, we can make a little difference. And what if we had metrics that started to say, like, hey, last year we did this, next year we did this, and the year after that, and then people started to look to us and say, wow, they're really onto something when it comes to wildfire safety, resilience, taking care of our land, taking care of our people. And I think, if anything, that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm really supportive of even what you guys do, because I think of Costco, right? You guys are taking care of land. You think it's important, and so do we. We also think lives and structures and that kind of stuff is important too. So we want to make a difference, and that's why we're here. But if you have any questions specific to this, just let us know, and Elaine will be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Andy. We appreciate that. Mr. Stark, did you have a staff report?
I do, Madam Chair and members of the board. The item before you this evening is a threefold request to continue Costco's partnership with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council to promote wildfire resilience outreach and actions here in the Conejo Valley. The specific requests are to authorize an appropriation from the Woolsey Fire Recovery Fund, approve a contract with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council to support community fire safety programs, and to authorize use of a single-source acquisition process for contract services. Wildfires are a fact of life in Southern California, and much of the Conejo Valley lies within areas designated as high fire hazard severity zones. These zones reflect the fact that our regional climate produces long periods without rainfall that result in dry vegetation conditions and periodic Santa Ana winds that have the potential to amplify fire severity if fires are ignited during these wind events. Building community wildfire resilience is important in reducing future losses of life and property, and requires a community-wide approach that includes actions by our local fire department, natural lands managers such as Costco in the city and the Park District, and area homeowners. The success of local resilience efforts depends largely on the coordination among these groups. The project presented here fosters efforts to bring communities together to plan for wildfire resilience by promoting home hardening practices to homeowners, nurturing neighborhood-based resilience groups, and providing direct home hardening assessments and assistance. Throughout the Conejo Valley, there are multiple existing programs that are focused on fire safety. The Ventura County Fire Department maintains one of the state's most effective local firefighting forces and has a division specifically for wildland fires. So they have experts in the types of fires we're likely to see here. The fire department also oversees the countywide weed abatement program, and their award-winning Ready, Set, Go program helps homeowners in preparing for and surviving a wildfire. Natural lands management groups like Costco in the city and the Park District undertake this annual weed abatement on our properties and perform this activity on approximately 400 acres annually. The defensible space that's created by our weed abatement programs helps prevent home ignitions from radiant heat and direct flame contact and provide important safe areas for firefighters to work in suppressing fires. Since most home losses during wildfires are caused by wind-driven embers igniting fuels that are close around the home, homeowners play a very crucial role in preventing home ignitions. The fire department, Costco, the city, the park district, and community organizations such as the Fire Safe Council and our local resource conservation districts are all supporting community outreach efforts to homeowners. Costco has been working closely with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council since 2020 on community resilience education. These efforts have resulted in multiple educational webinars on fire topics ranging from home hardening to fire insurance options, training volunteers to perform home ignition zone assessments where a homeowner can directly learn person to person about how they can make their home safer. Over 60 home inspections have been undertaken in the last 18 months with the Fire Safe Council. They've produced 4 free chipper days to help homeowners that are thinning vegetation for fire safety get rid of all that extra vegetation. And the Fire Safe Council has been out in numerous community events and distributing materials on home hardening. And I think maybe most importantly, and what we heard from Andy and Elaine, is that coordinating with other regional organizations is a big part of this effort, and standardizing our approaches so people in our community and communities around us are all receiving the same information. The project before us today takes what's been learned over the last 18 months and refines approaches to reach the community with wildfire resilience information. These actions break new ground in our community and focus efforts on where they are most needed. Some of the highlights of the proposed project are identification of priority service zones within the wildland-urban interface, and this is to make sure that the programs we're delivering are directed at those that need them the most and that might be most at risk, just so our efforts are focused because we think they'll be more effective if focused geographically. We'll be working on direct mail educational outreach to homeowners in these priority zones. We'll support neighborhood-based resilience groups, and these can come in a lot of different sizes and shapes. They could be fire safe councils themselves. There's also national programs like Firewise Communities. There are options in neighborhoods to get together for neighbors to work together and to work with the local agencies and neighboring landowners on fire safety. So that's pretty exciting for us. We'll be working on continuing the successful home hardening assessments and work with homeowners on trying to line them up and figure out how to actually get some of these practices installed. Again, the Fire Safe Council will be participating in public events and neighborhood meetings for resilience education. As part of this contract, we'll also be supporting a wildfire liaison that'll be based here in Thousand Oaks and work in the Thousand Oaks and Simi areas and helping to coordinate actions among agencies and make sure we're all communicating effectively. And lastly, we'll be working on a pilot program that would help actually implement home hardening practices on some selected homes through a partnership with Senior Concerns to identify at-risk seniors. The reason we're working on a pilot in this area is that we anticipate state funding to start focusing on what our area needs the most, and that's this home hardening stuff. So if the state is planning to put money into programs like this, we want to have a framework that would help us take best advantage of any new resources that become available. At the June 24th meeting in 2020, the Costco board meeting, the board approved a framework for allocation of funds received in a settlement over the damages suffered by Costco in the Woolsey fire. Within this framework, the board dedicated resources to promote actions that help prevent home loss due to wildfires. The recommended contract expenditure for this year's Fire Safe Council contract is $69,620, and this will be drawn from an allocation assigned to the Community Fire Protection Outreach and Public Agency Coordination sub-account within the Woolsey Recovery Funds. The current balance of that fund is $292,633. Costco's procurement policies mirror those of the city of Thousand Oaks and require justification for entering a contract with a single entity without competitive bids. A single source acquisition for contract services requested in this case because the project will make use of existing programs, educational materials, and community partnerships that have already been developed by the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council and are not available from another single organization. Contracting with the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council will therefore achieve economy and timely delivery of services in the community. And since it's 80 degrees outside today, we're anticipating that, prompt delivery of this kind of information will be important. To conclude, the services proposed meet important community goals and are consistent with the board's purpose in allocating Woolsey Fire funds to outreach in this regard. And with that, I guess what I'd like to think this represents is some innovation in our area. We're trying some new things, and we concur with the Fire Safe Council that if we can step out and learn these things and get out in front of community's availability to provide these services, that we'll be more prepared than we would otherwise. And with that, I can take any questions.
Well, comment first. I think the idea of this program is really good. Certainly the Costco has an important role in maintaining our open space and to the extent possible without damaging the open space to reduce the risk. Obviously we can't eliminate, but reduce the risk of wildfires. But at the same time, a program like this, I think, points out to the people in our community that it really has to be a partnership, that Costco will do its part, but the community as a whole and individual homeowners also have to do their part. And this seems to be the focus of this program. So I think this is a terrific idea. In reading through this, I believe this is more than just an extension of the original agreement that we've had with the Fire Safe Council, with some additional programs that are going to be implemented. Question I had, it appears to me in looking through this that this contract does not have a specific time frame, that it's more a, I guess, a dollar frame, that the program will continue on until the contracted funds are expended. Presumably, if the program is continuing to work, that an extension might be requested, but it's more of a financial as opposed to a time-constrained contract?
Well, the contract will ultimately have a term stated in the contract, but what's most important is the provision of these services. Costco would probably not, we would choose to extend contracts to get the services if it took longer to provide them than anticipated.
Okay. And then the other question I had, and perhaps one of the folks here could answer the question, but I know I believe you said 60-some homes have, homeowners have gone through the home hardening assessment, and that somewhere along the line you trained individuals to do these assessments. How many individuals did you train as part of this initial process?
We brought in a trainer named from Surefire Training who was trained through NFPA, and we trained, it was 12 train the trainers to go out. So they took the course. It was over 3 days, and then they had a task book that they actually had to go out under, being shadowed by the trainer. Actually, there were a couple of trainers. Go around a home, do an assessment, talk to the homeowner, and they were kind of graded on how well they did. And how well they did was based on whether or not they were eligible to go out and do home hardening assessments out in the field. So it's a pretty comprehensive training program.
Okay, and I'm just curious, what type of backgrounds did these individuals have?
It was really interesting. A lot were from CERT or DART, and then there were retired firefighters, and then there were individuals who had been impacted by wildfire and wanted to do something. It was kind of it was an interesting mix of people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Director Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of reflecting back on some of the past. I too have a career in the fire service, and I can remember back in the 1990s when we had some of the initial discussions about starting a California Fire Safe Council. Yes, met up in Sacramento for that, and to see where it's grown over the years is very encouraging. And I've also thought about how we as an open space agency are involved with this, talking about homes, but the way I look at it is it's really a community activity. The open space is just an amenity for our community. We're caretakers of the open space, but it's a community as a whole that really we're trying to protect. And the fire chief would know you can't just, make one house safe and then that's good, because if the neighbor's house is not safe, they're still at risk. So likewise, whether it's the open space, the neighbor's house, the house, or the whole block, it's a community activity. And so I certainly support that. And I also appreciate the fact that our tri-agencies, the city, the Park District, and Costco have partnered together for, maintaining our open space and vacant lots, whatever you want to call them, to do what we can on our own territory to move forward with that. As I consider the idea of home hardening, I know one of the biggest challenges is how do you get existing buildings hardened when the building and fire codes are really designed for new construction. So it's hard when we have a community that basically is built out and there's very little new construction. How do you now start incorporating that with new construction? So unless you go into the retrofitting of existing structures, it's not going to play out. The data that I've been reading from our large fires that have occurred, including like the Paradise Fire, and some of those in Santa Rosa where houses burned that weren't supposed to burn because they were outside of the area. And yet even those in some of our own community here in the Woolsey Fire, Thomas Fire and such, where they have done some assessments in the kind of pre-2008, which is when some of the fire codes building codes started to take effect on home hardening, and see how this has changed over time. And while the data is limited, it is showing an uptick where houses that have had this hardening are showing better resiliency than those that have not. So I think we're on the right track. We do have a long ways to go. I do believe we can provide somewhat of an incentive, maybe some encouragement for those that have gone through this process and seen it firsthand, and that there's a way to move forward. What I would like to suggest is as we move forward in this direction, and unfortunately we have two people here who relate all too well to this, is think of those who did have their homes destroyed or damaged in our recent fires, and perhaps reaching out to them. It's been 3.5 years, so I would hope that maybe they have rebuilt or unfortunately had to relocate or do something. But to reach out to that contingent first and say, is there some way we can reach out to that group and help them? And after all, the funds came from a fire that they were directly impacted by, and it would be only appropriate to get those funds back into those types of family uses. I do recall talking to a family who rebuilt, this is decades ago, rebuilt following a fire, and they rebuilt their home almost exactly the way that it had been before the fire. And just to hear the stories of them saying, yeah, I went to go get the family photos of the closet, opened the closet door, and it's just like, oh, that's right. I don't have those anymore. And I know you folks are going through that as well, those types of things. So if there's anything that we can do to try and at least touch those families first, I think it would be appropriate. And then I think the other thing that's important to remember as we move this direction is while we're focusing on home hardening in this case and trying to protect structures, the education process is also going the other direction, where if we have a home that's hardened and we've educated those folks in our community on how to keep a nice, tidy yard, that will minimize ignitions from those private properties going into the open space. So it's really goes both ways. It's not just all fires starting on open space and affecting homes. Those fires have to start somewhere, and a lot of times it's on private property. And so if we can minimize that, we are protecting open space. So I think a multiple benefit in that process. But like I said, I think just my one request, so to speak, is to reach out to those that have unfortunately suffered in the past due to fire. If we can target them, say there's some way we can assist with them if they are still in the process moving forward, and then reach out to those vulnerable or those more susceptible communities within our area here. That would be my suggestion, preference.
I can share that the city's community development department established sort of a concierge staff person, because the homeowners that lost their homes in our area going through the rebuilds to help work with them on the rebuilds. So there is a relationship, established with those that did rebuild. So there's an opportunity.
Very good.
Thank you. Yeah, this is exactly the emphasis that I think is so important statewide is home hardening, structure hardening, minimizing the kinds of things that could really make a difference in a wind-driven fire. It's science-based. We've got a lot of data that shows that, and it's thank you for what you're doing. And indeed, I mean, I think probably the next step, and it'll probably have to be a state measure, is some way to actually help individual homeowners finance something. If they, I mean, a new roof is probably $10,000. I don't think there are many wood shake roofs left in California, thank God. But there's still, even the ember vents, those really work, but you have to have a contractor install them. That costs money. Enclosing the eaves. I mean, some of those things are not big ticket items, but for some homeowners, it could be a real stretch, and renters too. The mobile home parks. I mean, those. So hopefully we can find some other relief from. We can't do it, but hopefully there will be a program to make it beneficial for people to actually be able to make those financial investments. But having your team go out and help individual property owners and homeowners see what they can do right now, I think is so key.
Well, I think through the process, we will be investigating ways of identifying those that need some financial assistance. I think, what groups like ours have learned and through research is that every small step that one takes at their home can increase that resiliency factor. And so we don't have to retrofit all the eaves, and it's whatever the homeowner can do and does do helps grow the resilience of a much larger community.
Indeed, and the education factor. I mean, just if there's a fire in the area, look around your patio and see what kind of wood furniture and flammable furniture is up against the house. I mean, those are simple things to do.
Yeah.
Indeed. And in some of our discussions with my work, we've had a number of entities say, wouldn't it be great if Home Depot could have an aisle that's all, information on here's what you can do, here's the particular vent screen you can buy. So those are all to be determined, but well, thank you very much for being here. And if there are no other questions, do we have a motion?
I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to move approval of staff recommendations to approve the contract with the RFSC, to authorize the expenditure for the contract amount from the Woolsey Fire Recovery Fund, and to authorize the use of a single source acquisition for the contract services.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll second that.
Very good. Thank you. If no other discussion, do we need to have a roll call vote? We don't have any. I think we can just do it by affirmation. Aye.
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 All right,
Yes.
3 ayes.
Support.
No abstentions, no nays. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think our next item is the appointments to the Standing Committee on Naming.
Good evening, Chair Skay and members of the board. In 1997, the Costco Board of Directors adopted an open space and trail naming policy. This policy established a standing committee on naming and indicated that the committee be comprised of 2 board members and 1 member from the Conejo Open Space Trails Action Committee. Members of the naming committee have varied due to changes in composition of the Costco Board and COSTAC over the years. The most recent appointments occurred in September 2018. At that time, directors Bill de la Peña and Huffer and COSTAC member Dorothy Sullivan were appointed to the committee to select names for several new trails. Earlier this year, Costco received a request that the Indian Creek Trail in the Wildwood Open Space area be renamed. On its own, the word Indian refers to individuals from India rather than Native Americans, so does not accurately reflect the origin of the people to whom it refers. In addition to this trail, new names for other trails and features whose names include the word Indian would also be selected. These consist of Indian Creek, the Indian Cave Trail, the Indian Cave, and Indian Maiden Falls. Staff will be coordinating with a representative from the Chumash tribe to obtain recommendations for these new names. In addition to renaming the preceding trails and features, a name for the connector trail between the Wishbone Loop and Saddle Pass Trail must also be selected. This past March, COSTAC members renominated Dorothy Sullivan as their representative for the committee, and to complete the committee, the 2 prior board member appointments may be reaffirmed, or 2 Costco board members should be newly nominated. Following appointment of committee members and coordination with the Chumash tribe representative, staff will present possible new names to the committee for consideration at a mutually convenient meeting in April 2022. The Costco board would then vote on the committee's recommended trail names at our board meeting this coming May. And with that, I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Huber? Yes, Director Nichols.
I just had a question regarding the request to change a trail name. Are there, I guess my question is, if anybody comes up and says, yes, I don't like the name of that trail, I'm requesting a change, is that something that would be entertained? I mean, I was just wondering, what criteria is there for raising to the level of renaming as opposed to just leaving it as is?
Well, I think it really is a case-by-case basis, depending on what the request is. But in this situation, once upon a time, the term Indian was used to refer to indigenous people, but technically, when one says the word Indian, that's a reference to people from India. And in this case, we are not referring to individuals from India, the country. The intent was that the reference would be to indigenous people, Native Americans. And so this is just really not technically accurate. So we just want to make that adjustment. And more, indigenous peoples also really prefer to be referred to by tribe affiliation. So Indian is this kind of really outdated and outmoded and old-fashioned. So we would like to, that's what the adjustment is about. But if somebody just simply came up and said, oh, I don't like the name of the Stagecoach Trail or Stagecoach Bluff Trail, well, we would like to know what the reason is, and whether or not that reason is valid would then indicate whether or not we would be entertaining that request. But really, we believe that based on what I mentioned earlier that this is a reasonable request.
So I guess just the point you were trying to make is when you say case by case, there's no real criteria on if it meets these 3 points, for example, then we'll consider renaming. It's just what the concern is that's expressed, and if it seems like it may have some benefit for consideration, that it's entertained, and just kind of on its face value, and then not necessarily having to, like I said, meet specific criteria.
Correct. And that's simply because we don't rename trails very often. So our naming policy is really written to more for the purposes of selecting names and establishing names for newly built trails, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So the request to rename is not something common. If it were common, then I imagine we could establish criteria for what that process
Yes.
would
yes.
entail, or
Yes.
you know, at what point does the request have merit? But
Mhm.
as I said, it's not a common occurrence.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess just what comes to mind for me for this instance, since it's in the Wildwood area, and then the Wildwood development was developed with a certain intent in mind, hence Wildwood Fort, the TP, Indian Creek, all these names were part of that. Even the street names have a certain air about them. I just say, well, gosh, does this mean that now street names are going to be changed? How far does this go? If somebody, obviously that's not within our purview.
No,
But
and
I just see that. It just seems like maybe there's a larger issue here to be addressed rather than just one trail at a time. I didn't know if there's some criteria for consideration or if it's just,
well,
hey, we'll take it as it comes.
we'll take it as it comes. And in reviewing our inventory of trail names, from my inspection, I don't believe we have any other trail names where there is an incorrect geographic reference.
And basically, that's the function of the naming committee to say, to address whether or not a name change is valid or not, and
Sure.
to make a recommendation to
But
the full board.
I also assume that if one individual came up with said, I hate Stagecoach, that you wouldn't necessarily have to convene this committee
No.
just to
No.
say, that's not really such a great
No,
idea.
I think that reasonable individuals can determine that, and it would be clear that if somebody hypothetically were to contact us and say, I hate the name of the Stagecoach Bluff Trail, well, that's on its own. There's no real merit to convening the committee and then contemplating names. But here we have a case where this particular, the word Indian, once upon a time was intended to refer to Native Americans, but technically Indian really refers to people from India.
Mhm.
So let's make that adjustment and get that straightened out.
And certainly, I mean, that's be up to the committee, but, it wouldn't be that difficult if you were to replace Indian with Chumash, since you
Right.
made the comment that the Native Americans prefer references to their own tribe as opposed to more generic terms. So, I mean,
Right,
that
and-
certainly would be one possibility.
Right, and there are a number of, local Chumash in the area, and so we do intend to coordinate with them to obtain recommendations. And you may know, too, I know that you're both frequent visitors of our open space, is already in the Lang Ranch open space area. We do have trail names that are from Chumash language.
And certainly the Park District's relatively newest park was a
Correct.
Chumash name,
Yes,
Sapway.
yeah,
so-
exactly.
Trails,
Right. Right.
Exactly. I think it's a way to recognize the original inhabitants and their descendants, and maybe get some more interesting place names.
Right, right.
So I guess the question is, Mr. Effer, are you still willing to be on the naming committee?
I'm happy to do that. Best of my recollection, we've only met once since I was named to the committee, so it hasn't been exactly
It's not a big
onerous
workload,
duty.
okay.
So,
Right.
and I don't know that it is necessarily required, but I think at least traditionally, most of the committees you tend to have, you have one member from the Park District and one member from the city. So, but unless Director Nichols had a burning desire to join the committee, I'm more than happy to continue my service, so.
I think the naming committee has been doing an outstanding job, and it should be left intact.
Right, and so
Thank you,
Director
sir.
Bill De La Pena will be by default, will continue.
Yes, she can't say no, so we'll say yes on her behalf.
Yes,
Very good.
okay. Do we need a motion on that, or is just the consensus all right?
I would make a motion.
All right. Okay.
I will go ahead and make the motion, Madam Chair, to reappoint our current committee members, Director Huffer and Director Bill De La Pena, to continue on to the naming committee.
And our COSTAC member, Dorothy Sullivan? Yes.
Yes, that's
She was
right.
just recently
Yes.
selected, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah, she was,
so-
I think it was a recommendation for us to consider? It was, or was it, is that how that works?
Yes, in 2018, COSTAC had chosen her to be the representative for the committee, and then at this COSTAC meeting this past March, she was reselected for
Okay.
that.
So that committee actually selects and nominates on their behalf, and then this board just nominates the two board members.
And accepts the
and
nomination
And I
of,
will amend my motion to accept the COSTAC recommendation to nominate Dorothy Sullivan.
I'll second your amended motion.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 No nays, no abstentions. Thank you. And I believe with this that we don't have a closed session? No, all right. So we are adjourned until our regular meeting, which will be May 11th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.